Good afternoon, BBIS, and welcome to anyone else who is listening. My name is Miss Johnstone, and I hope you're feeling brave today because I'm going to read an excerpt from The Gravedigger's Son by Patrick Moody. Now, I've chosen this book today because it's got some great characters and it's set in a graveyard. And when I was younger, I loved reading stories about monsters and vampires and haunted houses, and I'm pretty sure some of you guys do too. So sit back, relax, and enjoy The Gravedigger's Son. The Gravedigger's Son, Chapter 1. Ian Foster sat close to the fire, mindlessly poking at the embers with a stick. He liked to watch them flicker and spark, fizzle and pop. It helped him pass the long nights in the graveyard, especially when he grew tired of his lessons. Now, lad, look up here. Ian lifted his eyes to his teacher, which was a difficult task. Bertram wasn't the easiest thing to look at. There were a couple of reasons for this. 1, he had the odd habit of staring. It unnerved Ian, especially because his teacher never blinked. 2, he wasn't exactly alive. 8th row, southeast corner of the lot, 2 stones from the left. I know the stone, Ian replied, frustrated. Well then, mister, too big for his britches. Does that stone have a name? Of course it does. Mary Cook. And what's the date on poor old Mary? There is none. She made her headstone special so no one would know how old she was. Aye, that she did. Ian sighed. He looked around the little camp they'd set up, surrounded on all sides by pale granite slabs glinting in the light of the fire. Bertram, we've gone over every stone in this part of the yard. Can't we stop for the night? No, and we'll go over them tomorrow, and the night after that, and the next night, and that's all we ever do, Ian protested. Eyes still trained on the fire, he ran his hand over the spine of the book he'd shoved into the pocket of his cloak. Rare and Curious Plants, Volume 4. He wished he could take it out and have a read, but Bertram would say that was disrespectful. Why couldn't Bertram ask what colour frost juniper turned in full bloom, or how many petals grew on star moss when it clung to a fern? Ian usually faltered a bit when asked to recite the names on the tombstones, but he could point out every flower in the cemetery, every type of tree in the thickets, every type of wheat and grass swaying in the meadows. Aye, Bertram snapped. That's all we'll ever do, and that's all we're going to keep on doing. Bertram leaned forward to light his pipe in the flames, singeing a bit of flesh off his cheek in the process. Bertram was the only caretaker the cemetery had ever known, and the gravedigger was supposed to trust him with his life. Bertram loomed over Ian, a giant of a man, although 400 years had shrunken him a bit, and he had to limp around with the aid of a crutch. The old grouch was falling apart. Years of toil had left him in a sorry state of disrepair. Ian often had to help his teacher bandage up limbs that had fallen off during their long midnight walks. It wasn't uncommon for Bertram to lose a finger or a toe on their treks, sometimes even an arm or a leg when his demonstrations became a bit too animated. The loss of Bertram's limbs was as common as a stubbed toe or splinter. He'd already lost an eye, and his nose had vanished long before Ian was born. He'd once been a village blacksmith, and later on a soldier. He loved to tell Ian about marching under royal banners, evading death, and sharing victories with his men, about how he hunted down his fair share of enemy knights, chasing them through valleys and forests, through long hazy summers and bone-chilling winters. The old grump still got teary-eyed when he talked about those days. Once Ian turned 11, he was old enough to begin learning the family trade. His father had seen fit to appoint Bertram as his tutor. For the past year, the reanimated blacksmith had met Ian every night to teach him the art of speaking with the dead. A digger must know all those who slumber in his yard, he'd growl, for there'll be a day soon when one of them comes a-calling. I know, Ian would huff, night after night. That particular night was no different. Bertram's patience with Ian's moodiness had worn thin, and it showed. Oh, you do you? Well, you little know-it-all, how's about you recite the Digger's Code? Now. Bertram took a long pull off the pipe, nodding gravely. Ian crossed his arms, reciting the words that had been drilled into his head since birth. The first rule of the Digger's Code spilled out easily, so much that Ian didn't have to think about the words. The dead are not the living. They shall not walk above the ground, nor breathe the air of mortal man. Aye, Bertram grunted. As far as Ian could tell, old Bertram was the one exception to that particular rule. For a good reason, though. Ian had quickly learned that Bertram's past wasn't all colourful and heroic. He'd heard the story many times before. He knew it just as well as the Digger's Code. There was once a great king and a soldier to guard him. An old soldier, weary and worn from too many battles, who spent more time laying about than keeping an eye on his lordship. One night there was a storm, and in that storm crept up an assassin, too cunning and too quick for the old soldier to notice. He slipped into the castle like smoke and shadow. And during the night the king was slain, while the soldier, who should have been watching him, lay fast asleep in his bedclothes, snoring away like the oaf he was. Bertram had been awakened by Ian's ancestors and granted his one true desire, a second chance to serve with honour, to protect with life and limb, and keep a never-ending watch for the rest of his days. He had served as the Foster family's retainer ever since, constantly vigilant, and though his limbs were a bit worse for wear, his mind was razor sharp. His grumpiness, however, only seemed to grow worse with time. Ian prodded at the flames once more. They shall not walk above the ground, he muttered under his breath. Except for you, that is. The old corpse shot Ian a look with his good eye, grunting like a boar. I heard that, lad. Very clever. Clever's all well and good, but even the clever can fall. Sometimes harder than simpler folks. And I'll have you know that your father's 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 father woke me up so I could keep an eye on this place. It'd be in shambles if it weren't for me. Second rule. A digger shall not grow attached to the dead. Show compassion for the pain of the restless souls, but love them not, for that is the path to confusion and danger. You need to understand them, boy. The dead long to be heard. They'll long for company, for a sympathetic ear, but they'll never be your kin. Third, the bones of the dead must return to the earth, where they shall find rest. Aye, always. Don't want any more corpses walking about mucking up the place for the rest of ye air breathers. This old un's more than enough. 4. The dead are the dead, and nothing can change that. Mortal life is a gift given only once. It cannot be lived eternally. And don't you forget it, lad. Last one now. A digger must not refuse a request from the dead. He must do everything within his power to set things right and guide restless souls to the great beyond where they will find peace everlasting. Bertram leaned back, pipe smoke billowing out his empty eye socket. Very good. We'll make a digger out of you yet. Ian turned back to the flames, not even sure he wanted to be one. The more he recited those old words, the more stale and distant they felt. Well, Bertram growled, taking a long puffy pull of the pipe. I suppose that's enough reading and reciting for one night. Off to bed with you. He motioned towards the manor, far off in the distance. It's a long walk to a warm bed, lad. And don't go wandering the way you did last time. Straight to the manor.